ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool, man. Tommy Kerley, really appreciate you coming on the show, man. Fellow 0861 for the old heads that'll get mad at me for saying 0861. Uh, I looked on. You sent me some information. You said you grew up in California and Alaska. What was that like? Was there any kind of military influence in your growing up or anything?
Oh yeah. So my father is a Vietnam veteran. He was in the Navy for 26 years. He started out as a greenside corpsman, and then he got into naval special warfare in the special boat units. I mean, he got interested in that when he was in Vietnam, when he was on like river boats and that kind of thing. And so after Vietnam, I know he did some time on ship, and he was with Special Boat Unit 11 out of Mare Island, California, which it isn't there anymore. And that unit's I think got yeah, that unit got disbanded under the Clinton administration, if I'm not
Mm.
mistaken. But so yeah, I grew up around that. There was like a Navy Marine Corps kind of influence, and and yeah, I grew up around all the I definitely saw Platoon and Apocalypse Now at a pretty young age, and I mean, so that definitely influenced. I mean, by the time I finally enlisted, I mean, the Army or the Air Force, that wasn't even a question. And so after I tried college the first time, I was in Alaska. Then I just made the decision to enlist.
That's sick,
So,
man.
but yeah, so originally from Northern California, halfway through high school, my whole family just uprooted under the there was California was getting weird at the time, and so my family uprooted and moved to Anchorage, Alaska. And after high school and my first college attempt, I enlisted. So yeah.
That's legit, man. Did your dad ever tell you about Vietnam or anything like that, or was it just something you knew that he did?
He told me some about it. He got shot at on on the river boats and gator freighters and that kind of stuff. So I mostly knew that. I definitely, ever since I can remember, I've known who Jane Fonda was,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. And I remember, I turned out a lot more like my dad than I ever thought I would. But I remember like being in my dad walking me to the school bus stop, and he always wore like a cami blouse, with like the sleeves rolled up with like cargo shorts and like and sandals kind of thing. And he always had a beard, and so here I am, in my 30s, and I pretty much wear sandals and shorts everywhere I go, and don't care.
Yeah, I'm a pro flip flop guy. I am
Yeah.
also in sandals quite a bit. What part of Alaska were you in?
Anchorage, so that's southeast or yeah,
Southeast, yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Did you travel much inside of Alaska?
Oh, a little bit. Alaska is a big place. There's not too many places you can really drive, though. I mean, there's a lot of places you can only get to by plane or boat.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can drive to Fairbanks, which is like right in the center of the state. I went there once. Don't recommend it. Um,
I actually
but
liked it.
Anchorage
I've
is
been to
pretty cool.
Fairbanks. I've been to Fairbanks actually. I thought that whole area was pretty nice.
I went there. The time of year I was there wasn't that great. I was doing some construction when I first got out, and I was, I was working all day, and then I was going on base to. I got medically retired, so I got the blue card, so I can go, on and off base, and so I was working the day, and I was driving on Fort Wainwright to go to the gym at night, and I remember um, driving through the gate and just seeing sadness and the complete void of motivation in the faces of the dudes that were the gate guards. I was like, oh, they looked really, really, really miserable.
Yeah.
So, and I was the time of year, I want to say it was September, and that time of year, the sun just, I mean, you start losing daylight, but I mean, in that time of year, the sun is just kind of on the horizon. So it's always just it always seems like you're driving into the sun, so it's a pain.
Mm,
I didn't enjoy it.
that's interesting.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I got to go up there actually while I was a mechanic before I lap
Hmm.
moved with the EFSS, the Expeditionary Fire Support Systems test program. We
Hmm.
took it up there to drive the vehicles around, in Arctic conditions, and also shoot the 120 millimeter mortar and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right there by Bolio Lake, the Bolio Lake test facility, I believe it's called, like the Bolio Lake
Hmm.
cold weather testing facility. Man, middle of nowhere. Like
Yeah.
there's a little town nearby. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was super small, but I remember going there and there was like a general store with like I don't know. It was like it was something from that I didn't think existed still. Like you go in, you could buy furs and stuff off the wall and
Hmm.
everything. I was like, this is crazy. And like the owner was missing like part of his nose and like some of his fingers and shit because he said he had been caught in a winter storm. He'd been out
Oh yeah.
hunting and he's like, yeah, you just don't know. He's like, within an hour, or 2 hours, the temperature can drop like 40 degrees. And if you don't have the stuff, you end up like that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was super
Dangerous.
cool, man. I got to see the Northern Lights and everything like that, which was a
Hmm.
really unique opportunity and something I wanted to do. But yeah, I think that's always interesting. Anyone that comes from Alaska or has like lived there for a decent amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a cool place. I'm living in Texas now, and I like it here, but I will say I do miss the mountains from time to time.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's super nice. Alaska got really romanticized after that. What was that book called where they go out to the bus?
Oh yeah, Into the Wild.
Into the
Is that it?
Wild. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah. That really good book. I actually read it. Where we were at was near the Stampede Trail where he went down. And
Hmm.
ended up like McCandless or whatever the guy's name was and died. For those that don't know what we're talking about, it's just like teenager kid that decided to just ditch society and traveled the U.S. for a little bit, and then his plan was to go up into the Alaskan wilderness to survive for a while, and then once he was done with that, he would come back into society or whatever. Well, he
Yeah,
died, um, and mostly
yeah. They made a movie about it. It's a good movie too.
it's a good movie. I dislike the part that they leave out, like, hey, if he'd have had a map, he could have known that he could have got out of there. Like, he didn't bring any
Hmm.
basics that anybody that's like been in the outdoors would have with them. So I think it's a really cool story about youth and adventure and all that, but it's also like a example of stupidity and how the wilderness can best you if you're not properly prepared and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That Alaska kills people. I mean, I don't know what it's like lately, but like every year it kills someone. Just I mean, just the exposure. I mean, like in the summertime, for instance, people die of exposure and hypothermia in the summertime. A lot. The wildlife. I mean, you wouldn't think so, but moose are pretty dangerous, and bear attacks. I mean, everyone has weapons, or at the very least, bear spray. It's common knowledge up there. When you go on trails and such. So, I mean, even like yeah, even the people that are pretty left of center up there, have weapons, and so it's just common sense up there. It's a very dangerous place. It's a lot of
Yeah.
things that'll kill
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely not your like average area. Yeah, you definitely have to be ready. Outside of Alaska, the only place I've really ever carried bear spray or anything was up here in the Sierra Nevada, out here in some of the parts of California when you get up in the
you.
mountains, just because they have them. Yosemite, around Yellowstone. That's really it. But yeah, Alaska is like, I don't know. I'd love to go back. I want to go back again and visit again. My son actually was there last year and they did a cruise that took them up to Alaska from Seattle, and then it was like 4 or 5 days on land where they like took a train and all. I was like, man, that's super awesome. That's so. For those that haven't been, I highly recommend people going and checking out. When I was a mechanic, I actually had a guy in my unit who was from Maine and then went to college in Alaska in Anchorage, and then joined the Marines. Also, he also joined the Marines, and then when he was getting ready, it was coming up on his EAS, and he was like, the only way I'm going to re-enlist is if you can get me stationed in Alaska. And they got him like an I&I duty spot up there. And I don't think he left. I think he's still there. And now I think he got out of the Marines and now he's like a commercial diver, which is pretty wild, especially up there. Yeah, man.
There's a there's a reservist unit in Anchorage with right there on J Bear Joint Base, Ellendorf Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work range control there. It was a reconnaissance unit at one point. I think that they're just an MP unit now or something like that, MP reservists. So
Interesting. Yeah. So, the decision to join the Marines is kind of a big one. Obviously you had some family influence and stuff like that. What was like the deciding factor, and why did you come in knowing what job you wanted, or did you kind of come in and, just feel it out?
well, it's sort of an interesting story. I mean, like I said, like the Army or the Air Force was just never even a thought to me. Growing up around that. I mean, with my dad being, having been a Greenside corpsman, there was that, Marine Corps influence, and then certainly with him being in the special warfare community, there was that influence. So it was like it was one or the other, and going through. Are you there? I think you're frozen.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, through high school, I did, football and wrestling, and was really kind of into that, competitive, sort of go hard attitude. And I think I would have been more, motivated to try, take a shot at this, Naval Special Warfare community, right out of high school, perhaps. But my dad started out as enlisted, obviously, corpsman. Then he went, he became an officer, and he always told my siblings and I have an older brother who's a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and then I have an older sister as well. But his rule growing up was, because he'd been enlisted and he obviously had his retired with a commission. Um, he always told us that he wanted, if we joined the military, the only way he would give us his blessing would be, if we go in as an officer. Um, so it wasn't an impulse of mine to enlist right out of high school. So I, after I graduated, I got got a job. I did construction my first summer out of high school, and then I started going to the University of Alaska Anchorage, just like I think it was like a Bachelor of Arts degree, something like that. Drawing and painting, that kind of thing. Don't know what I was going to do with that. I was like, no, I'll get my degree. I like to draw and paint, so I'll do that. And after, oh, I don't know, I think it was after like a year and a half of college or something like that, I just stopped caring, wasn't motivated, and wasn't as in as good a shape as I was in high school. Because like wrestling and football, that's lots of conditioning and everything that comes with that. My high school wrestling coach, who I'm still good friends with, was a reconnaissance Marine back in the day, and so there's another influencer right there. And but anyway, like I, did the whole college thing. Wasn't in kind of an avid fitness routine, and so by the time I kind of figured out I didn't want to keep doing this college thing, I was working in a warehouse, and I remember this thought specifically. Like there was my direct supervisor, and again, there's nothing wrong with this, but my direct supervisor had been working in that warehouse for 15 years. I'm just like, okay, I can, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I was like, I don't want to do this for the next 15 years or so. Like, I don't want to turn 30 and have that story to tell. So I've never been unpatriotic. I mean, I consider myself patriotic, but my biggest motivation to join when I actually did was the allure of the path less traveled. And so I just wanted to go do something different. So that was my biggest motivation. So I went to the recruiting office, and I did this without talking to my dad. So I was talking to the recruiter on the DL. I was like, I don't know how he's going to take this, because he didn't want us to enlist because he'd been enlisted himself, and but I was messing up college. But it was pretty. I didn't realize at the time it was pretty obvious to everybody. And by the time I actually did tell them, hey, I'm enlisting, everyone they were really supportive about it. My parents were like, okay, they kind of saw the writing on the wall before I did, that college was I wasn't the whole college path wasn't working out for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time like I went and told him, I already kind of chosen that path myself, and I was like, I'm doing this. Everyone was really supportive. So, I mean, it worked out. It didn't cause any rifts or anything like that.
That's good.
And even, my brother was in the, I don't remember if he was commissioned at that point or not. I think he was doing his, he went to, what was he doing? He was going to the California Maritime Academy out of Vallejo, California. And I, I, th- I think he had his commission at that point. I'm not sure. But even he was just like, yeah, I think it'd be, a good thing for you. So, so yeah, I chose that, and I wanted to go right away. I want to say I enlisted, December 2006, and I was standing on the yellow footprints May of '07. That sounds about right. And how did that go? Right off the bat, like my thought of the Marine Corps was, you know, being in the infantry. And when I talked to my recruiter, I said, hey, I want to do something like that. He's like, well, I don't have any, '03 spots open for like until like the end of that summer or something. He's like, but I have like, it was called the Bravo 6 ground option contract. It's basically a scaled down open contract. And he talked me into signing that. Knowing what I know now, I didn't know what 0861 was at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing what I know now, had he told me about that, I would have picked that. So, but it just so happened, my GT score was high enough, and they were really looking to fill 0861 spots, and just by luck, happens, circumstance, whatever you want to call it, I got 0861, and I didn't
Nice.
know what my job was until I got to the schoolhouse. And I remember, do you know who Mass Sergeant Chromo is?
You say Chromo?
I think Chromo or Cuomo. I forget what his name.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he was at the schoolhouse. I remember we got to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and it was everyone in my class. It was like 20 something of us, and I want to say there was about like 28, 27 of us, and like 18 of us graduated. And I remember my class was sitting in some bleachers, and he was giving us the rundown. I was like, oh, this job sounds cool as hell. I would have picked this right off the bat. So I remember in boot camp, like drill instructor saying, fire supportman. I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, a fireman or something like that. I was like, that's weird.
That's
I
funny.
had no idea. Then I got to the schoolhouse. I'm like, this is awesome. And then, being at Coronado, I'm like, this is really awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was there, we were like running the Budzo course and all that kind of stuff, running on the beach. I was like, this is just motivating as hell. And so then I got stationed at Camp Lejeune, and yeah, I checked in December of 2007, and I was in Iraq with Second LER by March of '08. So just like I checked in while everyone was on leave, and so it was like that. I deployed right away, and I had no idea what the hell was going on. I mean, honestly, they shouldn't have deployed me that fast. I mean, they should at
Yeah.
least let you kind of settle to know, like, figure out what's going on. What I didn't realize at the time was this was kind of latter days of Iraq, of OIF, and nothing was really happening. It was that was the only Marine Corps I ever knew. It was work up, deployment, post deployment leave, a little bit, at some point you'll transition into normal Camp Lejeune field ops, and then you start the whole workup rotation again. So it's just like boom, boom, boom. So that's the only Marine Corps I've ever known. I mean, I'm hearing all this cool stuff about guys doing, jungle warfare stuff and all these neat little schools. I'm just like, I have no concept of that. I know about the desert, and that's about it. You know.
Yeah, I had a buddy, or I have a buddy, Michael Hanthorne, who's been on the show multiple times, and he's a Motor T guy. He was a Motor T operator, and that was kind of he did 4 years, and he did Fallujah, and then that was his first deployment was to do Fallujah in '04, and then he came back and went back. I think he went to Ramadi the second time. But from
Mhm.
talking to him, it's like two different like Marine Corps experiences because he was either preparing for deployment, on deployment, or coming back from deployment and then getting ready for the next one kind of deal. And I talked to him about like after going to my second Afghan deployment, I went on my first MEU. Like I got to travel, got to go. MEU sucks. You got to be on ship and stuff like that and everything. But outside of the shittiness, there's also some opportunities. Obviously, I got to go to Hong Kong and Singapore and like all these places, and it's just like I don't know. It's just a completely different experience for someone that only knew deployments. It's a different Marine Corps. Not only just knowing deployments, because that's like what a lot of guys are. Even your regular infantry guy, a lot of times it's just work up deployment, or during these days of the global war on terror, that's what it was. But the cool thing about being a 6-1, an 0861, and then when you move up to become like a JTAC, is you get to go work with different units. You get to go TAD and go different places and do different kinds of training. So it kind of breaks it up a little bit compared to a lot of the MOSs. You definitely got lucky, man, because like I said, I came in open contracting and became a mechanic, and I was miserable because I was the complete opposite of what I wanted to do. And it's funny that you brought that up, because people that weren't around during that time, 06, 05, 07-ish, it was hard to get an infantry spot. You would think that would be just like, anybody can go do that. No, man. You would literally, and that's why I ended up being open contract. It was like one of those, you can either leave today.
For some reason. I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you, dude. That's what the recruiter told me. Maybe he was trying to fill other spots. Like, I don't.
No, I was there the same. I enlisted in 06, and I know other people that enlisted in 06, and they had the exact same experience. I got told I was good, and then I got to MEPS to leave for boot camp, and they're like, "What job do you want to do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what job do I want to do? I'm supposed to be infantry." And they're like, "Oh no, man." They're like, "Yeah, you can do that, but you're gonna have to wait 3 to 6 months." And I'm like, this is the early spring of 2006, and I'm like, "There's no way I can do that," because I thought I was leaving today, and I quit my job and all this other stuff. So I bit the bullet and did open contract. Not as lucky as you. It's funny also, you said how you weren't sure what the job was because you're fire support, because outside of the military, what does fire support mean? No one knows what the heck that means. So it's fun. Yeah. And I don't know if you know this or not, the now at the MOS school at Fort Sill, the students don't go to Coronado anymore. There's no more naval gunfire at Coronado. Yeah. Yeah, they do, because
what idea was that?
I don't know what it was like. I think it was a cost cutting measure. I don't know what it was like when you went through school, but when I went through MOS school, you weren't guaranteed to get a live naval gunfire opportunity. Like we did our field op at the end where we were supposed to do live, and our class got to do live, but I guess sometimes the ships don't show up or there's an issue, so not everybody gets to do a call for fire anyways. So they're like, you know what? They'll learn it in the fleet. We'll just teach it at Fort Sill. So now all the new 0861s only get to go to Fort Sill.
That's stupid. That's really, really stupid. I mean, I loved Coronado. I mean, that's hands down like the most motivating place I've ever trained, I mean, it's a really cool experience. I mean, I didn't know it was. I mean, we went out to San Clemente Island. Frivolous. That's where like the Buzz guys do their version of the SOI. Like their introduction to weapons training. And I guess it's not like this anymore. But it used to be like there's a little. What is it like Is it like the southern tip of the island? I don't remember where it is on the island. Or there's a compound right in there. Yeah.
The castle or whatever they call it.
There's like a cliff overlooking a beach, and it's really cool. I mean, we had I want to say a Ticonderoga ship that showed up, and we were calling for fire on these metal hull targets on the beach, and it's really cool to be overlooking the beach there. You can see the ship, and you can see the ship and your target shooting at the same time. It's really cool.
Yeah, it gives you an understanding of the reality of fire support too. To me, that's the thing you lose out on doing sims, is seeing an actual bomb drop and the effects that has, rounds going long and short. Because a sim is a sim. It'll put stuff almost perfectly. If you call in the perfect grid, it's going to hit it perfectly every time. The reality is you have naval gunfire, as we know, shoots long and short along the gun target line, and
That is just a damn shame, man. Especially now, like from what I like now with like, this big push for the Marine Corps to get back to their maritime roots and stuff like that. So, I mean, on paper, I mean, that's where Marines come from. They're the quote soldiers of the sea, to
Hmm.
do amphibious landings and that kind of stuff. So for them to cut corners on that, I mean, I mean, by that reasoning, they should make the entire schoolhouse at like between Camp Pendleton and Coronado. I mean, you can just avoid the trip to Fort Sill altogether because at least in Camp Pendleton, you can get the artillery piece there, and then they could just whenever they have to travel to San Clemente. I mean, that sounds reasonable to me,
Yeah,
but
well, we're not
that they're
cool enough to
cutting
be in
corners like
charge.
that's stupid.
Yeah, I am not a fan. I wasn't really a fan of it either. I think if you any opportunity that someone gets to get a live shot off naval gunfire, they should take it because, I mean, how often did you do naval gunfire when you hit the fleet?
Never. I
Never.
mean,
That's the thing, and it's like if you've never actually done it, even in school, the moment that it does come up, that it does become available, how well are you actually going to be able to execute it? You know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
I don't know. I agree with you. I think the thing too about Coronado is, like you said, it's super motivating because you're out there. You see the Navy guys going through buds. You see the guys going through
Hmm.
BRC. The basic reconnaissance course.
Yeah,
It's just
we
like,
shared our squad bay with them.
what's that?
We shared our squad bay with them.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah. It
Nice.
was it was the guys doing BRC, and I want to say the Phase One Buds guys were like in the squad, like the squad bay below us and above us, and so it's like we saw them every day.
Yeah, yeah, for
So,
sure. I think they actually don't do BRC at Coronado anymore either. I think it's all been brought in house at Pendleton, but I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong
mhm.
about that. But yeah, man, it's what what were your feelings after MOS school? Did you feel comfortable? Do you think you felt comfortable coming out to the fleet and doing your job, or was it, I've scratched the surface. Now I need to come out here and learn.
Uh, can't really talk about this without talking a little bit of trash, but I mean it's got to be said. Um, No, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, like, I kind of had entry, knowing what I know now, I would have taught. I mean, I feel like still now I could kind of completely rechange how I approach, like, how to take somebody who knows nothing and make them proficient in the trade. That being said, I mean, everything would be kind of geared towards like what I experienced in Afghanistan. It's just because like you get schoolhouse stuff and then you get thrown into a situation and then after doing it, you understand what it is you have to do. I mean, hell, dude, not even in my, I skipped this part of the story. So I did Iraq right away with LER. Nothing happened. I just did CrossFit for a deployment. Basically, there was nothing going on in Iraq. I can just say I was there. I got to participate. I mean, my Iraq campaign medal is just a participation trophy. Nothing happened. And then you know, uh, gear change. So I deployed. That was the end of the Bush administration, and then fast forward to 2010, it was Obama's first administration or first term, and they all of a sudden decided. I mean, Marines were going to Afghanistan before then,
Mm-hmm.
but they just decided the Marine Corps is going to take the Helmand province just out of nowhere, and I can talk about. I've learned some stuff since then as to why, but that's another conversation. But anyway, that's besides the point. It was just like, hey, the Marine Corps is going to take the Helmand province, and that was like uh, that the old documentary. It was like the CNN 1-6 push through Marja and stuff like that. That was actually happening at the same time as my deployment, but I want to say Marja was the main effort,
Mm-hmm.
and so just a bunch, and it completely fell in everyone's lap too. It's like out of nowhere, just like everyone's going to Afghanistan, everybody. And so that was just the new thing. As a matter of fact, I always told dudes, I was like, be careful what you wish for, just because in my experience, you're probably going to get it and keep getting it and keep getting it and keep getting it and keep getting it. You know, so I remember thinking after Iraq, I was just like, well, I guess I kind of, missed my chance to be in the shit. Oh, shucks. And, boom, like Afghanistan just kicked off out of nowhere,
Yeah.
it's like, and so just before you even realize it, just like, you know, you're going to work, you're going to work, on the June, you're day in, day out, blah, blah, blah. And then before you know it, you find yourself in the middle of what would later be like more or less the Wild West days of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there was a few different um, times that you could say that about Afghanistan. There's like the early 2000s, like a little bit of stuff happened there, and I knew some Marines that were in, like when Marcus Luttrell was doing his thing, but like specifically the push to take the Helmand province, like early on, like that was a major thing,
Yeah.
and it's a lesser known thing too. I mean they haven't really been making movies about that or anything like that. So I don't know, give it a few more decades, maybe they start want to tell them stories. But there are a lot of untold stories. Um,
From Helmand, yeah. That's
yeah.
what this podcast is all about, man, because that's the thing is that people don't realize, like, except for those of us that were there and we saw our buddies or whoever do these things and go on these operations and whatever. For the rest of us, it was just, I don't know. It just seems unfair for some of these stories to get left behind. So I'm glad to be one of the people out here trying to give it some coverage and stuff. But we were talking about Marines going into Helmand. Now, you said there's like some stuff behind that you want to talk about. Are you talking about why Marines specifically went to Helmand? Because it's my understanding that they wanted to put Marines in different places, and the Marine Corps leadership was like, give us this one area and it'll be all Marine supported. It'll be the full MAGTAF, Marine Air Ground Task Force. We will be self-sufficient. We don't need assistance from the rest of the forces or whatever. Is that what you were talking about? Or
well, I suppose there's for sure a lot of layers to what was going on. There was what we were told. I mean, I generally know what we were being told then, and you know what? Like at that point in time, no one really needed a reason. I mean, the last thing you're thinking about when you're actually active duty is, well, this might not be the same for everyone, but I mean, you're not really thinking about cause and stuff. I mean, 9/11 was still in recent memory, and so everyone really wanted to just go to a faraway land and kind of get their peace.
yeah,
So that was it, and it's just, and as young men, everyone wants, young men kind of crave a rite of passage.
yeah,
So that's the only thing dudes really think about. But I'll say I've met some interesting people, right? And so I guess before I tell that, I say that to say I don't really remember all that much, like what the message was like at the time, because it's like, when you're a sergeant and below, the only thing you're really thinking about is that kind of rite of passage, because at that point, my seniors were all like salty ass Iraq vets, I mean guys that were like, Ramadi, all that kind of stuff, and you just kind of wanted to measure up, you wanted to fill those shoes. And so whatever the reason, I just remember being told stuff like, oh yeah, we gotta fight the Taliban. Their opium trade is funding terrorism, something like that. It's kind of fuzzy, to be honest with you, but it was something to that effect. Um, this is probably going to rub some people the wrong way, but this is just what I got. I have a friend that was issued his Rolex. That's all I'll say about him. And the push for Helmand, what was going on behind, like underneath a lot of layers, it was a push to get control of the opium trade for some pharmaceutical companies. I'm not going to get all Alex Jones on anyone, but that's a version that I got. Could be wrong, but that's a version like why it actually happened, and that's kind of shocking. It doesn't really bother me though. I mean, if you really do a meditation on war and why things happen, things are rarely in history are things as like good versus evil and cut and dry as people want to think, or as people would like to believe. I mean, that's really the case. I mean, even I mean, you go back to just tribal conflicts, like ancient Celts or whatever, groups that fought each other. It was usually kind of just a posturing thing. Sometimes it was a defense thing if you're actually getting attacked. But I mean, wars have always been that way. So I mean, and for that matter, I'd already. It didn't really even bother me to think about it at the time because, I feel like my whole life I kind of grew up in the shadow of Vietnam anyway, which is just kind of the nature of that conflict was kind of tragic. You
Mm-hmm.
have this, on the surface, this struggle against communism, and then people like Jane Fonda and stuff, and ideological subversion happening at home while people are fighting that. All the while, there's other layers to it. I mean, there's things that Central Intelligence was doing behind the scenes because they wanted perpetual war. This is right around the same time. This is when they had orchestrated. They did what they did to assassinate Kennedy and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like there's always this shady stuff behind the scenes, and so I'm not unpatriotic by any means. It's just that's just the nature of wars. There's
Yeah.
there's always been a military industrial complex. I mean, I'm not. I don't have any kind of what do you call it? Like moral crisis or anything like that over finance. Like not at all. I mean, screw them. Um, but I mean, that's the story I got behind the scenes. Is like the big purpose behind the push through Helmand was to get control of the opium trade. So, which that really doesn't even bother me all that much. I mean, the concept of okay, my tribe is going to go fuck up your tribe. We better the hell at least get some kind of resources out of it. You know what I mean? Like that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really bother me all that much. So, I mean,
Yeah, no, no, I get what you're saying.
and there's
I don't think it's
go ahead.
unpatriotic to question the decision making why asking the why and wanting to know the why, especially when you're as intimately involved with it as being someone that's on the ground there. It's a little different than,
Yeah,
Joe Schmo sitting on his couch watching a talking head on CNN going, "Huh, I wonder why we're doing that."
yeah,
Um, I think it's more patriotic to question because then you're ensuring that the people that are supposedly in charge are not just doing whatever they want. You know what I'm saying? Because if you don't question it, they'll just go out and do whatever the heck they want, and it is what it
hmm
is. I don't know. That's an interesting. I haven't heard that. I guess I wouldn't be surprised. It'd be weird. It'd be weird that would be why. Well, one, I guess we were kind of
that's
looking at
one of the
we
layers.
were looking at
Yeah,
it two different ways. You're talking about Helmand in general. The reason why we went into
yeah,
Helmand in general. I was talking about the Marine specific. The reason the Marines specifically took Helmand, and that was because the Marine Corps generals wanted to have an area that was all Marine centric, that was all Marine fire support, all Marine ground troops, all Marine, for the most part, there were some foreign and some Army guys there
yeah.
occasionally, but it was a Marine area of operations. And because they didn't want to break up the MAGTAF at all, that Marine Air Ground Task Force,
hmm
the decision makers were like, well, then you're getting Helmand and you guys are taking care of all that. Now, the reasons for taking Helmand, I mean, that could be the case for sure. It would be weird. I wonder. I really need to get like a DEA guy on that deployed to Afghanistan and talk about some of the stuff
We
that
had a
they were
couple of
doing.
those EA guys with us. I mean, I honestly I doubt that they would be as much in the know as to the. Well, I'm definitely curious what they would have to say.
Yeah, like
I
what was the reason?
remember.
What were you guys even doing?
Yeah, I mean because it's for example, I mean I mean everyone's a pawn to a certain extent, and just because you're doing, I mean, take us for example. My job was to drop bombs when we got pinned down. When we got pinned down and unable to maneuver. That was what I was doing. And so when I was actually there, I wasn't thinking any bigger than my platoon or my squad. Because that's what mattered.
Yeah, yeah.
So like there was no a few times I remember patrolling. I mean, there's poppy fields everywhere. I remember patrolling past um, dudes that were harvesting poppy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking because they always told, I didn't give this too much thought, but I remember them saying, yeah, that all this poppy is funding the is funding the Taliban against us. And I kind of remember thinking, like, should we be like stopping them and like getting rid of these fields or anything like that? But like that was never a thing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, maybe some, but like we were pushing. We did five pushes within one deployment, you know. So holding really wasn't our thing, you know. I mean, yeah, we were holding our direct AO, which was like, I mean, it was like our territory to the north, and we had lines in the sand about in like 2 kilometers to like the south of our patrol base. There was like we had an OP on like a ring of hills and stuff, and then there was a wadi. So that was our area. Like we knew that if we ever crossed certain areas, you know, you didn't do that unless you're planning at least a platoon size movement or so. You know, I mean, like our first push was an unplanned, like it was moving to contact that turned into like a 3 day push. You know, but anyway, like that's what we were dealing with. And so I guess by 2012, 13 or so, like Afghanistan had become into more of like those transition to more like holding deployments. You know, so maybe I'm sure there was, or I don't know what there was. I wasn't there then, but I would venture to say that there was more of a focus on, okay, what are we doing with these fields? You know, what's going on? But I mean, we were patrolling past the farmers and stuff that were harvesting the poppy, and this is the same shit they were telling us is funding the Taliban against us, but it just wasn't a priority. It was just, you
Yeah,
know,
the reason I was given for that is that if we destroy the poppy fields, then we're destroying the local economy. So it's like a
that's right. I
double-edged
remember
sword.
that too.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. Like we can take down all this poppy and stuff because it's, you know, it's funding them, but it's also funding all these farmers' lives. And if we do that, that's their livelihood. How are they going to get money to live?
Mm-hmm.
And part of this is an issue with like when we first came in and USAID, which is the aid, you know, the group from the US government that goes in and gives aid to these areas and stuff like that. I read this really good book. My buddy John Isley gave it to me or had me read. I think I'm looking at the right one on my bookshelf, and it's called War and Decision. I'm pretty sure that's the one I'm talking about. But it talks about going into Helmand and all that stuff and how USAID originally showed up and was trying to have the farmers grow, I think it was corn, and they attempted to grow corn, but it's not really good for corn there. And all these, you know, all their fields were dying. They weren't get the yield of the crops that they wanted. And it was just much more lucrative to move over to poppy and, you know, create opium and stuff rather than trying to do corn. And like one of the arguments in the book was like they really should have brought in experts that knew about Afghanistan, you know, because we had them because USAID and there's like there was a village built there in like the 50s or 60s that looks just like an American village because there was like companies working there trying to get resources and stuff like that. But they were saying that what they should have done is come in and introduce cotton. You know, it's easier to grow and tougher soil and stuff like that. And it would have benefited not only them, but, you know, whatever. But yeah, it's a weird game, man. It's a weird thing to unravel. And like you mentioned before, it's not really for the E5 and below, you know, those sergeants and below, and even really staff and COs for a lot of the part, you're just you're doing what you're told and you're managing your small piece of the pie. You know, these big strategic decisions of, hey, are we going to take down these poppy fields? Are we going to do this? We're going to do that. Is at a different level of leadership, I guess, making decisions. I don't know. It's just, so yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird game. Yeah. I don't know why were we there? You know, I remember in 2013, before I went on my advisor tour, that's when Osama bin Laden was killed. And my mom called me and was like, "So are you not going to have to go to Afghanistan now?" I was like, "No, Mom, I'm still you know, like the deployment's still going." So that was the problem. I think that was the problem then, and that's the problem now that a lot of people have you know, that they're trying to work themselves through. Like, what were we doing? What was the purpose of us being there? Why was my buddy killed in Marja? Why was this guy killed in, you know, this place? Like, what was the purpose? And when we look back at it, it looks like we fought, you know, like 18 one-year wars rather than one solidified like campaign plan. Like this is the end state. This is what we want to do. Here's how we're going to accomplish it. We're going to send these guys in and then let the Afghans, you know, kind of take it from there. So, I mean, don't feel bad about, you know, giving your opinion on on what was going on because it is what it is. So
Yeah, and something that like it doesn't really bother me. It's just kind of the nature of it's the nature of existence. It's the nature of war. It's not just the nature of Afghanistan. It's the nature of every conflict.
yeah.
That's happened before us. And so, and here's another thing. I mean, this really does mess with some dudes. Like I'm kind of at like a stoic place with it, but it still really messes with some dudes. And I would say this, if you end up in this crisis, like, oh, what was it all for? Instead of kind of tearing yourself up over that question, ask yourself, would it make a difference if it really was or wasn't for, the Constitution or what have you? Like, would it make a difference to who you are now? Just like if you think of things in that sort of a way, it's just kind of the way of things. It's there's always been war, there's always been conflict, kind of a thing, and there's certain people who walk that path,
Mm-hmm.
so the path less traveled. So that's just the nature of the path you walk. So isn't it kind of pointless to kind of dwell on that?
I mean, there's
I,
levels of that, right? There's levels because there's
yeah,
guys that went overseas to Iraq and Afghanistan and wherever, and they question why was I sent there? Why did I do this? Why did I do that? But there's also guys that never deployed, and
sure,
that bothers them as well.
sure,
Like the
yeah,
fact that they did an entire enlistment or whatever and never got the opportunity to deploy. And I imagine, I know I've had multiple people tell me it's like anytime someone tells them thank you for your service, that when they mention being in the Marines, they're like, I didn't do anything. And that's like
mhm,
another weird kind of thing that individuals have to work through. I knew guys. I remember when I got to maintenance battalion, one of my buddies was picked for a deployment because maintenance battalion, they take small groups of you and send you out with units to deploy. And he was
mhm,
picked for a deployment and did his workup and pre-deployment leave and was like came back from pre-deployment leave and they're like, hey man, we have too many people on the roster, you're not going now. And that was his only opportunity to deploy. And he did his 4 years from 2005 to 2009, which was like a super active time, never deployed. And, like that makes dudes feel like shit. So if you feel bad that you deployed and you did something, and not that you did something, but you don't know why, also know that there's people that feel bad that they never got to deploy, that they were only on, it was like being on a football team and only ever getting to practice, but never going to the game.
it really does mess with some dudes, and it's like it makes me think of that film. What was it? Jarhead. It was
Mm.
kind of it's all about that. I mean,
Oh yeah,
there is something
100%.
to be said about going on. Like once you end up in the shit, there's kind of a release. It's like finally, but I mean that's its own Pandora's box, because I'll say, hell, dude. I mean, I've seen my side of it. I used to say, "Be careful what you wish for, dude," because like my first push, like I got everything I thought I wanted in my first push, and it was just like it was like getting waterboarded with gasoline, dude. Like fuck. I mean, shit. My day two of my first push, like I was in a daisy chain of nine. I've told that story, the Battle of Lone Tree Hill, and it was like getting waterboarded with gasoline, dude. Like it's like, oh no, no, get like here you go. This is you're not done. Yeah, that was like that was push one of five. Fuck.
Yeah, Paul Smith told me to ask you about that to make sure that you spoke about that. Before you get into like that whole deployment, can you tell us you were with 1-2, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So so the whole sequence, the whole timeline, or my timeline in the Marine Corps was, like I said, boot camp summer of '07, schoolhouse, checked in with 10th Marines, December of '07 while everyone was on leave. And I chopped a second LAR. That's Light Armor Reconnaissance Battalion for everyone. That's LAVs. It's kind of like the Marine Corps' version of strikers, or like the Army's version of LAVs, more or less, something like that. And so I did that, was in Iraq. And then I chopped back to 10th Marines after that deployment. And then Afghanistan kicked off out of nowhere, and everyone was trying to, like I said, young men looking for that rite of passage. Everyone wanted to hop on an Afghanistan deployment,
Mm-hmm.
and there was plenty of deployments to go around for everyone. So then the deployment started popping up, and I got chopped over to 1-2 for my workup. That was it was Yuma, Arizona, then 29 Palms, and then Afghanistan. So that was summer of 2010. Then after that, I went back to 10th Marines. I re-enlisted on that deployment, and I re-enlisted for orders to First Anglico, and then after that deployment, I got back, shot back to 10th Marines, and I got a DUI, which I got busted down from sergeant, and lost my shot at going, becoming a JTAC, and also lost my order. So that sucked. And there was that's another story. I got into quite a bit of trouble after that, but in a lot of trouble because like my brain was just jelly after that deployment. And then in the end, the Marine Corps took really good care of me, kind of on the DL, but I mean, hell, that's how everything positive ever got from the Marine Corps was like, while no one was looking, like hell, when I got my re-enlistment ceremony was just kind of all right, let's do this. All right, it was while I was on, deployment, so
Mm-hmm.
there was just kind of a quick little thing. It's like, all right, go back to your thing. Getting promoted to sergeant was, I got back from patrol one night. It wasn't even a legal promotion ceremony for that matter, because my platoon leader was asleep. My gunning was just like, "Hey, asshole, you picked up sergeant a few days ago." I was just like, "All right," and he just handed me my chevrons. He's like, "There you go." So that was it. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. That's fine. But
That's how I got promoted to Lance. Same
yeah,
way. Same way.
uh,
We were in
and
Bridgeport,
so
and they're like, "Hey, you're promoted," and I was like, yeah," or no. They're like, "Yeah, man, you're a Lance Corporal now. Do you want a ceremony or a formation?" I'm like, "I'm good." They're like, "All right, you can go ahead and promote yourself." I'm like, "All right." And I remember I was like putting my chevrons on, and my major walked by, and he's like, "Kramer, what are you doing?" I was like, "I'm promoting myself, sir." And he was like, "What?" Like, obviously, he wasn't as happy because officers get off on that stuff. But yeah, man.
yeah. And so, I mean, I got into quite a bit of trouble, but like I ended up spending close to a year, in the TBI treatment center. I ended up getting medically retired over TBI. So they're like, I didn't get an OTH with all the trouble I got on, I didn't get an OTH or anything. I got an honorable discharge and medically retired. I've got the blue card to prove it.
Nice. Well, don't hold that
There you
up. You
go.
might have your information on. I'm going to blur that out.
Yeah. Oh,
When you guys, when you got tapped to go out with 1-2, what were you being told? Let's also talk about what's it like. Tell the people what it's like because you're a forward observer, you're a fire support man. We don't generally, artillery battalions don't deploy, and they don't deploy, well, they deploy, but not with, their whole teams and stuff like that. They're going in as support. And with that, the observers are getting attached to the infantry units because that's where you do your work at. What was it like for you as a forward observer getting attached to an infantry unit? How did you kind of show that you're the professional in this realm and make yourself as valuable as possible for your unit?
well, by the time I got to 1-2, I mean, I got my dog here.
Oh, nice.
Sorry,
Wiener
let me
dogs. I used to have one.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So obviously by the time I got into 1-2, I'd already been with LAR as like, a POC and a Lance, and then I was a corporal and a sergeant with 1-2. Um, it was, I mean, it was fine. I mean, I was in the fleet. I mean, like what happens is, so as a forward observer, your MOS is a 0861. So like 08s, that's an artillery designator, but you don't. Well, there was a few exceptions to this, but 0861s don't deploy with artillery battalions. We deploy with infantry battalions. So the way it works is you get the word on whatever the deployment rotation for the infantry units are, and every infantry battalion rates a certain amount of 0861s. So it's usually, I don't know what the numbers are now, but it's usually one 0861 per company, something like that. I mean, honestly, there should be one in every platoon, if not squad, in my opinion. I mean, that just makes more sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then because you have machine gunners in every squad, it's a support role. So, but I mean that makes more sense to me. But when at the time it was 10861 per company. So um, so you chop over. So you get a deployment rotation for the unit. So you have to chop over in advance, like ahead of time of their workup routine, right? Or their workup training schedule
Yeah.
prior to deployment. So you'll break contact from your parent unit, which in my case was 10th Marines, right? Like you'll move into their barracks and do the workup with them, deploy with them, and then you usually take their post deployment leave block with them, and then you detach and go back to your parent unit. So you're always kind of the new guy everywhere you go. I mean, even when you go back to your parent unit, it's always all new people. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
just like, "Oh, who the hell are you?" People are always coming and going. So you're always having to kind of you know deal with the new guy stigma, if you will. So that entails kind of proving yourself. Every time you're the new guy, you have to show your worth, prove your worth, that kind of thing. So you show up and you've got to deal with your new company, your new command, command climate, that kind of stuff. You have to show, like, you can't show up and be all like shy and timid, because I mean, no one's gonna trust you with no one's gonna trust you to do your basic job, which is, in my case, just about every time I actually did my job was dropping danger close ordnance. I mean, hell, the closest shit I ever dropped was a 500-pound bomb airburst 60 meters away, a bunch more gun runs.
Jeez.
I got one of those photographs I sent was. Can you edit in
Yeah,
those
I'll
pictures?
have it pop up on the screen while we're talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to have that pop up, it's the one where we've got our backs to the camera. If I'm not mistaken, actually, I'm the guy. I'm pulling up the picture right now. I'm the guy second to the left holding up the handset to his ear. That's a 500-pound bomb I dropped 200 meters away. That was on that was push number 3. And we have just so happened to have a photojournalist with us on that push, and he got some really cool pictures. I really like that picture. That was in some newspaper publications. Like I see it pop up on the interwebs from time to time. I'll see it pop up in memes every so often. That was kind of cool.
I
I
thought that
remember.
was when you sent that to me. I thought that was a familiar photo. I was like, man, I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean that's kind of like my claim to fame there, I suppose.
Nice.
I remember talking to my folks or my fiance at the time, in between her getting railed out by, yeah, that whole story. I remember talking to
Oof.
her on the sat phone. She's like, oh my gosh, in the newspaper, huh?" I'm just like, okay. Um, and yeah, my folks saw it and that kind of stuff. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool and not cool because I'm sure your mom or whatever was like shit. I know my mom would
Yeah,
not be happy to see a bomb going off, a photo of me with a bomb going off next to me.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, so that was pretty typical shit that I mean, closest I ever called shit in was like 60 meters away. That's 200 meters away. Right before that picture was taken, I did on that same target. I did rockets and guns with some helos, and the next push after that, I did some other gun runs and stuff. And so yeah, that's the kind of shit you got to like that you're trusted with. That's like you bring as the JTAG JFO forward observer, you bring a lot to the team. I really love the job, and I still miss it to this day because, I mean, I got all kinds of love for machine gunners and stuff. Love assaultmen. Everyone brings a lot to the team, but like to be able to have that much direct impact on the situation, it just feels good. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like you never get that fifth wheel syndrome, so to speak.
Hmm.
So it's like, I mean, there's a lot of shit that leads up to that point, right? It's like, okay, you've already started taking contact. You're already, moving to contact. Um, you're doing your whole movement to contact thing, and by the time you get to that point, it, I mean, you've got a danger area that you can't cross because you're taking too much fire. You're pinned down. Like we were in that instance, there was a 200-meter danger area between us and the next compound, and they had, I want to say they're a little bit more uphill of us too. So it was like, okay, I mean, crossing danger areas that big, when you're pinned down, it's really dangerous. I've had to do it in the past, but I mean, it's always best to drop ordnance when you can.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's a and it's such a huge morale booster
Oh
too,
yeah.
man. It's just like everyone on like the whole squad, everyone turns into like when you drop bombs, everyone just turns into Pentecostals, like jumping up and down, getting all excited. So it's a really good feeling, to be able to have that much direct impact on the it's like scoring a touchdown, in the middle of a firefight.
How old were you at the
So
time? How old were you in this deployment?
24. I was 24 then.
Yeah, I know.
So
And
I
so for people that may not really, maybe not fully appreciate this, like, what are most 24-year-olds doing? A lot of them are on their first job out of college or whatever, doing whatever, whatever it is 24-year-olds are doing. And you're being entrusted to drop live ordnance and ensure that they're hitting the correct target, or give the targeting information for live ordnance and stuff like that. And something I've tried to kind of pound home here on the podcast and before I got out talking to new guys and stuff is the seriousness of the job. The reality is a mistake by you at the pointy end of the stick with the binoculars and the freaking compass and map figuring out the grid. The reality is if you give a wrong location, there's a bomb being dropped on somebody that shouldn't have had a bomb dropped on them, or a building that shouldn't have been dropped on. There's a lot of, it's an awesome job, and that explosion at the end is like, oh, yes, it went well.
yeah.
But before that explosion hits, there's a little thing in your head going, man, I hope this didn't fuck up. I hope this doesn't. I don't know. That for me, that's what it was. There's always I'm always questioning it, but I think I did that in a healthy way to where I was ensuring that what I was doing was safe, was effective and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I always got the same feeling. And I'm undiagnosed, but I'll say I'm a little bit dyslexic, like mixing up which is the
Yeah.
worst thing to be when you're dealing with, numbers, grids, your own location. There's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of math. It's simple math, but it's just a lot of steps and you can't skip,
It
one
has to be
one
done
step.
quickly and
Yes.
accurately.
And so it's that slow is smooth, smooth is fast thing. So it's like you have to move quickly, you have to do it accurately. So I kind of had my little kind of rituals of, making sure everything just, you didn't mix these things up. It's just, when it comes down to it, I mean, it's it's complicated, but it's also very simple. Whenever, like, especially after, calling in I mean, calling in, super danger close ordnance, like the biggest thing to remember, when I was teaching new guys after that deployment, especially, because I felt like I had a PhD on the subject. It was just like, okay, don't get too wrapped up in everything. When it comes down to it, you just do what makes sense. And if you don't have a warm and fuzzy, if you don't have that peepee touch, like we used to say, just like stop, reset, make sure you got it right, because it's just like it's on you. I mean, hell, when I was doing that talk on for that bomb in that picture, I was talking to a jet, and I was talking him on to this area in the compound where the bad guys were, and you do your thing, and then he describes it back to you what he's looking at. And I actually stopped. I was just like, I don't feel confident that we're looking at the exact same thing. So I just started over, but I was still able to do it quickly. So don't get flustered. I mean, this ties into everything, and especially this. You can't get flustered. Just calm down. You have to stay calm, especially. So that's where this whole kind of cowboy, what would otherwise seem like a cowboy lax attitude is, well, it's not a lazy attitude at all, because you got to remember, like, you're talking to, a pilot, that's a lot of money worth of hardware, and he's got a lot of destructive power. If the importance of staying calm and relaxed is, like, he has to have confidence in you, right? So this applies to everything. So if he feels like you're just blurting out numbers, or if if he's not on the receiving end of that warm and fuzzy, he's not going to drop if he doesn't feel comfortable. So that's where that kind of cowboy, what they call, bad habits on the hook side, like that's where that comes from. You have to be that way. So that's the whole. I get kind of shit for it afterwards, like, oh, those are bad comm procedures. I'm just like, no, they're not. These comm procedures produce results. So
that's at the end of the day, when we would teach JFOs or when we would teach guys that were trying to become JTACs, that was kind of what we tell them at the end of the day. Like, look, man, it's a conversation between you and the pilot. Tell him what you want, and he'll tell you what he needs. And like you said, everyone in that chain needs to feel comfortable about what you shouldn't be like. Let's wing it. When you're dropping a 500-pound bomb, it's probably close. Like that's just not acceptable. And I agree with your like you described, like the cowboyish mentality that or label that people give you. I think a lot of times too is that you're dealing with so much stress and stressful stuff that has real impacts on what's happening around you, that when you're not doing that, everything else is kind of like, whatever, man. Just like way more relaxed about like, oh yeah, whatever. It just, you become over relaxed as a like response to the amount of, and that's what I always told people about being a JTAC. People would be like, man, that was cool. That's cool. You were a JTAC. That's an awesome job. And I'm like, it is an awesome job. It's a super stressful job. And because of the stress, it's not for everybody. And
it's like you have to. One thing I was looking into when I got out was the whole air traffic control job, but like I was told early on I couldn't because of my TBI stuff. But I'm just like, and people's like, oh, it's such a stressful job. People are committing suicide. I'm just like, there's no fucking way this job is too stressful. I'm just like, no one's shooting at me. I'm not calling in bombs. I'm just like, it's. All you have to do is thinking. I mean, I haven't done the job, so maybe I'm full of shit here. But I'm just like, this. You're sitting in some kind of an office, right? And you're sitting in a chair, and all you have to do is think in 3-dimensional space and deconflict shit. I'm just like, I can do that in my sleep, but they wouldn't let me do that job because of my TBI.
Yeah, you're doing like permanent routing safety of flight.
Yeah. It's just like I haven't done the job, so I might be full of shit there. But like the idea of it doesn't sound intimidating to me.
Yeah, I knew a guy that was a recon Marine that went and was an air traffic controller before he went recon, and apparently the air traffic controller school in the Marines is extremely difficult. A lot of people fell out of that school apparently. Yeah, so I'd be interested in hearing more about that. But can you tell us? So when you got to Afghanistan, you're talking about doing these pushes. You want to explain to people what you're talking about? Like it's an operation, and then can you you want to go through and maybe give us an overview of each of those pushes? I know you said that the first push is when that attack on Lone Tree Hill happened, right?
Yeah. So at this point in the deployment, there's two kinds of well, at least like in my Marine Corps, there was two kinds of deployments really. It's like you would show up and there would be like a holding deployment, meaning the Marine Corps or whoever come before you had already taken over an area, so you take that AO or area of operation, and you just do holding operations, which would involve, potentially pop shots and or dealing with IEDs. Those are improvised explosive devices. It would be kind of dealing with that. A pushing deployment was a combination of both, right? So you show up. Like I said, like in my area of Afghanistan and everywhere at that time, there was, our areas and there was, NATO controlled areas and there were Taliban controlled areas, right? So going on a push implies pushing into their territory and taking their areas over, right? So we had lines in the sand. So we showed up, at this point, like, the British Army was in the Helmand province, and they had pushed into Helmand prior to us being there, and they were kind of holding their area, but there was still a lot of Taliban-controlled territory in the Helmand province. So we showed up, and we took over our AO from the two Lancs, the second Lancs. They call themselves the Dukes of Lancaster. British Army dudes. I'm still good friends with some of those dudes. Alex from Red Coat Apparel. He was a JTAC actually, and he
Oh,
was in my same AO. And so there's a bunch of British Army dudes who followed me on Razor Black. Good dudes. So, but like I said, they the powers that be decided that the Marine Corps was gonna take over the Helmand province. So when we would go on a push, it was pushing into trying to expand our territory and take over the Taliban controlled territory. So my first push, we had each platoon had their own AO, right? And so I arrived there with the main body, and they put all the fire supporters, the fire support assets at the company pause where our second platoon was, and they were just trying to figure out how they were going to divvy up everyone because my company had my company FIST team, it's Fires Integration Support Team. We had an artillery officer, a forward air controller who was a Prowler pilot, Penguin, good dude. And we had our FIST team leader, who was also, I think, the one of the platoon commanders as well. And there was a mortar FO, and then there was a squad leader with one of the platoons that was JFO qualified. And so the idea was to spread out the assets, right? And so there was the guy who was JFO qualified. Obviously, they just he was with third platoon, and so obviously he was the fire supporter for his platoon. And then second platoon was also co-located with the company command element, and so my forward air controller and my artillery officer my artillery officer, they just kind of remained with second platoon, and they pushed me out to first platoon, which ended up being the busiest AO like in my company. So I think second platoon did they helped us on our first push, and they had their own push, and we supported them. Like their push ended up being my second push in support of them. And third platoon ended up supporting Charlie Company for a while. That was kind of their claim to fame. But like an RAO though was super fucking busy. So they decided they were going to send me out to first platoon, and this is how my first push went down. We were convoying to drop me off at my patrol base, and that's where all my FO gear was, right? So at this point, I didn't have a map. I didn't have like my vector binos or anything like that. It was all already there. Like, okay, I was like, yo, I remember like, hey, I don't have a map. Like, I've got my own gear. Like, I had like my personal GPS, my compass, and like the gear that I had. And they told me it's like, okay, it's like when you fall in, when you get out to your platoon or whatever, it's like they're gonna have your vector shit and maps for you. So I'm like, okay, I'm not super comfortable with this, but
mm-hmm.
all right. So I was convoying out to my patrol base, and there was a patrol already out in that AO, right? So while they were out, they were testing the border, right? Like, or like the border between that AO and the Taliban controlled territory. So they were just kind of testing the water, so to speak. And while I was convoying out there, they were out on a foot patrol. They took contact, and then we ended up rerouting and to be their QRF, right? And so we show up, and there was a firefight between that patrol and a compound, and some more QRF showed up, and we ended up being there all day. Like it was just an exchange of like like machine gun fire, and that was my first experience taking mortar fire, which was like I remember being like, oh shit, we're taking mortars, and so those were at that point we were taking 52 millimeter mortars, which are like just like a cheap shit Chinese mortar, right? And they really weren't that scary. I remember, I mean, how my truck is parked just there. I remember seeing mortars hitting from me to there and being like, well, that really wasn't that big of a deal, but it was still kind of spooky, right? So it's like my first push, we take like mortar machine gun fire, and I remember thinking like, well, this isn't a big deal. I can get shot at all day. This doesn't really bother me. I mean, I've seen film depictions of getting shot at. I'm just like, it really didn't phase me. And then so after a day like of all that, we got a foothold in the compound, and mind you, we never stopped at the patrol base we were supposed to. We never stopped at the patrol base. We were ended up being QRF for this patrol that was out. So I didn't have any FO gear with me, right? And so at some point, like I dismounted and I just linked up with the squad that was out, and I ended up just being like, all right, well, I'll just make myself useful. So I ended up being a gunner for one of the 240 gunners. So I just ended up carrying like 600 rounds of ammo on my back, and I was just like, well, I'm just gonna be useful how I can. I was like, I didn't have I didn't have any FL gear with me. I didn't have my radio map, so there's no way for me to be, useful in that proficiency. So I just ended up carrying ammo. And so we got a foothold in this compound, and it looked like we were just gonna, pack up, retrograde, go back to the patrol base because, I mean, that whole thing started because of movement to contact, and where I was, the Taliban didn't mess with us at night, like on a push or whatever, the fighting wouldn't usually start till about like 8 o'clock in the morning or so. And so we were getting ready to pack up, and they started shooting at us again, started taking mortars and stuff. And so then we ended up pushing for another 2 kilometers or so. So fast forward, we got like no rest that night, obviously, because I mean everyone's all strung out, high alert kind of thing. And I had barely any food or water the day prior, and I learned some valuable lessons. That morning before we started getting shot at again, they finally pushed out. They pushed some chow out to us. I'll say this to the young bucks that are listening: never, ever, ever eat a full MRE when you're outside of the wire. Just don't do it, and stay fucking hydrated, because I hadn't had much water to drink the day before, and I was starving and dehydrated that morning. And so they brought some chow out to us. I remember I annihilated an entire beef enchilada MRE, and I had like one or two small like bottles of water, and then we started getting shot at again. So it was like I remember two things looking back in the deployment. I was starving, Marvin, and I was a little bit kind of complacent at the same time. I just it was in everyone's mind that we were going to retrograde and go back to the patrol base. So I'm like, okay, dipped my toe in the water. This is cool. Got, experienced some combat stuff, and now we're going to go back to the patrol base and jerk off or whatever, That's not what happened. So I had killed this whole MRE, and still hadn't had enough water in me, and we started getting shot at again. 6 hours later, 6 hours and 2 kilometers later, after, maneuvering under fire through these poppy fields and shit, more mortar fire. Another one guy got shot in the arm, so there was one Kazovac, and we pushed a couple kilometers and through this town, and behind this, just south of this town, there was this big old hill, a giant ass tree like on top of it. I don't know what kind of tree it was. It was the only tree like it around. There was just this big ass tree in the middle of the desert on top of a hill, hence Lone Tree Hill. And after pushing and clearing through this town, it was a group of us ranger filed up to the backside of this hill, and right when the point man got to the top of the hill, there was a daisy chain of 9 IEDs went off underneath us. And leading up to this point, dude, I was so fucking dehydrated. Like, I remember holding my rifle, and I had like 600 rounds, by that point, probably like 400 rounds, something like that, on my back still. I was so dehydrated, man, that like every step, my body was just locking up. And I remember having my gripping my rifle, my hands were just like locked around my rifle, dude. I had to like pry, prying my fingers off. Like, it was bad. I was really, really dehydrated. Like, it was a really dangerous situation. I was so fucking, I'd never been that dehydrated before. My mouth had been, everyone was out of water. My mouth was just sandpaper, I mean, I'll say, you carry as much water as you can, because one of the worst things that can happen to you is running out of water. It really sucks. And it's like 110 degrees out, which is relatively mild for, that part of the world. But it was still hot as hell. And so just leading up to this point, my mouth was already sandpaper, my body's just locking up. And then this daisy chain of 9 IEDs goes off right underneath us. And it was something else, dude. So like, I knew what IEDs were. It is an acronym. It stands for improvised explosive device. I knew what explosions were. those two words, the explosions and IEDs, became something very, very different to me. You know, it's like because you can't. There's no way to describe being swallowed up by the percussion of the blast and being right and just being swallowed up by just blackness. You know, because that's what happens. It's like that's probably one of the scarier parts of it too. Is just being swallowed up by that, you know, smoke, dirt, you know, all the ammonium nitrate, and just like there's just you get blown back. I remember being on my knees and elbows and just trying to suck in just this thick blackness, you know, around me, and there just wasn't air there. And dude, that was fucking hell. And so I remember being on my knees and elbows, and I start just puking. Right? And again, it's all just it's just black around me. I can't see the hands in front of my face. You know, I can't see the ground in front of my face. I remember being on. I'm just like puking up slime, and I'm terrified at this point because there's no air to breathe. I'm just sucking in this blackness, and I'm also terrified of like choking on this slime vomit, this beef enchilada slime. It was just thick, dude. It sucked. And so I'm able to you know, get up the beef enchilada slime, and I'm puking, and then like the blackness turned into a dark brown and then a lighter brown shit, you know, and I don't know how much loss of consciousness there was or wasn't. I think everyone got like a little bit of it. Some guys, one of our assaultmen, Hakeem, he doesn't remember it. He was right on top of one of them. He doesn't remember Lone Tree Hill. I mean, last time I talked to him, he doesn't he doesn't remember that whole event. We casevaced him, and it was a hell of a thing. I remember just being kind of confused and calling back to Canfield, one of our dudes, and like we called back a few times, and I think we asked like we were just really out of it. I remember um, we must have asked each other a few times if anybody had gotten killed. It's like, I don't know. Anybody get killed? I don't know. Are you okay? I don't know. Did anybody get killed? I don't know. It's just like that back and forth. And it's just that it really was.
Got
I
that
mean, that
concussion
was
brain.
yeah. That was the actual fog of war. I mean, because it was like literal fog. It's like you can't see, and that's something that's I've never really seen depicted in a film. I mean, probably like the closest thing is like yeah, remember that film with Jude Law, Cold Mountain, Civil War film?
I don't think I've seen that one.
It's a pretty good film. There's one fighting scene in it where this explosion goes off, and it's like this bunch of dudes like fighting in this pit, and there's like smoke and chaos everywhere. I'm just like, that scene specifically reminds me a lot of Lone Tree Hill. It's a good film.
What was the trigger
But
for those
that's
IEDs?
it was a commandet from I remember one of our assaultmen saying, you know, he saw like the line of deck cord or whatever for it, but I'm pretty sure that had to have been, yeah, that was a commandet for sure.
Was anybody
And
killed from that,
so
or
so we were right on top of 9 IEDs, and there was 13 of us, 13 Marines on that hill, and we as the dust settled, I thought for sure, like, I mean, dudes weren't going to be, you know, alive after that. And as the dust settled, all 13 of us staggered down off that hill. I mean, Hakeem was pretty like he had a busted lip, and he was kind of being carried by two guys. You know, he was much more out of it than the rest of us, but like looking like everyone was looking like ghosts staggering down off that hill. I remember that, just like that. You know, the 9/11 footage, how after like the dust clouds, everyone was just white, covered in dust. It looked like
mm-hmm.
that. You know, we all looked like that. And you know, after that, like everyone's just kind of staggered down off of that hill. And so this is one of the cooler parts of that story. We found out through ICOM chatter. Now, if anyone doesn't know, for those who don't know what ICOM chatter is, it's like intercepted Taliban communications. They didn't have encrypted radios, and so we could listen in on their comms. And so the Taliban, this is another reason we knew it was a command det, remote det daisy chain, was the Taliban were watching, and they were after this daisy chain had gone off and not killed any of us, they started calling us the monsters of the hills. I don't know how derogatory that is or was meant to me. I mean, hell, devil dog, Tuffelhunden was originally like a derogatory thing, that a name that the Germans used for Marines in World War One. But that's what they called us, the monsters of the hills. And so it's a lesser known nickname for Marines, if at all. But yeah, monsters of the hills.
That's
I actually
crazy, man. You guys are so lucky. Like, were they?
get that tattooed right here. Monsters of the hills.
Oh, nice. That's sick. What do you think
So
they were just buried too deep or what?
I'm thoroughly convinced that there was some divine intervention that was going on. So that was certainly, I think, part of it. The night before, it had rained a little bit, and
Compacted the
so
dirt some.
rain would have compacted it some. But even then, I mean, this is 9 like 45-pound jugs of HME, homemade explosive, and just one of those is enough to um, blow the engine block out of a truck. I mean,
Yeah, I was
here's an
gonna say
example.
those are that's 45 pounds is definitely a big one. That'll definitely
Yeah,
destroy a truck for sure.
and that was 9 of those. If I can,
Yeah, usually the anti-personnel ones were like 10 pounds,
yeah.
or
I mean,
something
this
like
is an
that.
example of what one. If it'll focus here, that's one 45-pound jug.
Yeah,
If
you'll
I
have to
don't know
send
if
it to me.
that's
I'll throw it up on the screen.
okay. I'll send
Yeah.
it to you right now.
Okay.
Forget. But
After
if
that, I mean, this is your first. This was like basically your first day out there, right? Isn't this
that was
all?
day 2.
So
Yeah.
your first week, you're out there and you're in this like, oh man, what was going through your mind after day 2? You've almost gone down from dehydration. You've been shot at. You've been mortared, and now you've been hit by 9 IEDs in one time. What was going through your mind about what was coming up for the rest of the deployment?
Um. Well, that was. I remember thinking. Remember, I said I got everything I thought I wanted. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a lot. I mean, I could deal with the exertion was one thing. I'd been shot at, been mortared, and then being in that daisy chain. I mean, really. I mean, that roughed me up pretty good, and
Yeah.
so that was. I mean, after that experience, it doesn't take long for you to become an expert at dealing with IEDs, complex ambushes. Sniffing them out. It's like you can get classes on IEDs on what they are, where they like to be, but it's just like once you actually encounter them, like you understand how effective they can be used in like a complex ambush, and pushes later on. Fighting you understand just how effective it is. I mean, how you can cripple a Marine Corps squad with a complex ambush that starts with some kind of explosion and some kind of engaging in an L-shaped kind of ambush. You can mess. I don't care if you're Delta Raider Ranger SEAL Team 6 or whatever. You can fuck up anybody, with that kind of a tactic, and that was the whole deployment, because of the ROEs, we can't just go around killing people, right? We have to wait till like the rules of engagement. You have to wait till you're being engaged, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what that means is you're always fighting on their terms. So you have to wait to be. So if you're being, which is a stupid way to fight, if you've ever read Sun Tzu, so you're always fighting on their terms. And so every move into contact starts with fighting your way through some kind of a complex ambush, right? So I will confidently say, smack my nuts down on the table to anyone and say, I am an expert in complex ambushes. I mean, I know, like, it's to the point because you're always thinking that, like, when you're on patrol, it's like, okay, if I was them, I would totally fuck us up with this and this right now, or I would put an IED in this blind spot and I would be posted up here and here. And like, you find yourself always thinking like them, like, even to the point where you're just like, these guys are fucking idiots. I would totally ass rape us right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like, so you become, I mean, to be when you deal with these situations, you start thinking like a terrorist.
Like a
You
hunter.
start thinking those tactics because that's all you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
a I mean, that's such a that's the name of the game, I guess. If you're a
yeah,
professional
it is.
soldier, it's like you have to be able to see what your own flaws are and see where you can be attacked. And it's one of those things where, like you said, you're walking around and pointing things out in your own mind. That's what a
Mhm.
professional does too. It's because it's always like, okay, if I'm here, where can I go for cover if I get attacked right now? If I get this happens, where are we going to put in where are we going to put in a medevac bird if we have to?
Oh
What's the
yeah,
most
dude.
logical place for this? It's like those are things that should be constantly in your head, anyways. And I mean, I imagine for a lot of people that doesn't naturally occur until they get into a couple firefights, and then it starts becoming a little bit more apparent. It's no longer like a field op. There's like real things happening. So I don't know. Yeah, man, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Go ahead.
I mean, just like for the young forward observers and JFOs and JTACs that are listening, I mean, you've always got to be thinking. I mean, number one, always know which way is north, always. And always be thinking about how you're going to do your next talk on. So it's like you can't be the one who's disoriented. I mean, there's gear and kit that you can carry, for that. I mean, I always carried I mean, in addition to my lensetic compass, I always had, just in case I was to get disoriented and to mitigate pulling out, handling my serialized gear. I had a little Boy Scout compass tucked into my little admin pouch, like just in case if I was to get disoriented, I can just whip that out to kind of have a north reference.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really needed it. I always knew which way was north, but always know which way is north. Always be thinking about how you're going to do your next talk on. And like you said, like when you're, especially like when you're out on patrol, how far away am I from the nearest cover? Because it's just like, okay, I'm up, they see me, I'm down. I'm gonna have to get up and sprint because that's what fighting is. It's like it's a whole bunch of sprints, and just that's why I say, I mean, you got to find a happy medium between not carrying too much shit because speed and mobility equals survivability. But like at the same time, I'll tell you, dude, like one of the worst things that can happen, aside from getting dismembered or killed, is running out of water. It really fucking sucks. And you can expect, like, if you're fighting in the desert, or someplace hot, do Marines ever fight places where it's nice weather? This is not a thing. I mean, you're gonna run out of water. I mean, kind of fast forward push number 5. One time, like you can expect to be out of water by hour 4 of like a 9-hour firefight. I mean, that's with everybody. It's just normal. I remember one time on my 5th push that lasted for like a week. Fuck. Um, we were out of, like, the fighting started by 8. I want to say this is 2 hour, like 2 in the afternoon or so, and
Mm-hmm.
we'd been out of water for a few hours, and we pushed into this compound. It was hot. Everyone had sandpaper mouth, and we came across this. There was a jug of water in this compound. It's like in one of those same yellow jugs that they use for everything. They'd spiked it with motor oil. They spiked it with motor oil, and everyone just said, "Fuck it." We passed it around and took sips of it
Oh
just to wet
man.
your mouth. So that's some real fucking hardcore ass infantry shit, man. It's just like, all right, you got sandpaper mouth. Nobody gives a shit. Everyone's dehydrated and has sandpaper mouth. Here, you're thirsty. Here's some hot motor oil water.
Mm.
So here you go.
That's like
Uh,
guys from 6th Marines that did the push into Marja talking about
mhm.
running out of water, and they're like, all we had was the wadi water, the water in the wadis, the canals, and
Yeah.
that's not good. They're like, and everybody was getting, dudes are getting dysentery and stuff from drinking this funky ass water, and yeah, man, it's a weird game of like knowing what to have on you or having the right stuff on you when you need it. What can you give us a breakdown top to bottom? What were you wearing? What did you take on an average patrol? Like if you were going out on an op, what did you have on you?
Okay. All right. Well, I guess just part of the conversation would be really relevant for dudes like in our skill set, our trade that are active duty now. So let's talk about. I have a rant about comms, right? So the radios we had. So let's start. let's start off by talking about comms. So the radios that we had was we had the 152s. I mean, it's like it's like a M biter, I guess in layman's terms, the
Oh,
size of a walkie-talkie
yeah, it's
over
like
one.
it's a handheld walkie-talkie kind of.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a handheld radio. It's VHF and UHF capable. Again, for everyone else, VHF would be like our, our ground comms, our company platoon tax, and UHF was for talking. Those are frequencies to talk to aircraft would be on UHF. And so earlier radios were like like the Prick 119 and stuff were only VHF capable. But the 152s are great because you had VHF and UHF. Now, we had those, right? But the thing about my AO was we had a bunch of micro terrain. So for some reason, we didn't have all that much reach with our 152s.
Mm.
So I ended up getting my hands on a full size 117 Foxtrot. And again, that's like this
That's the big
big.
one.
Yeah,
Woo!
that's the big one. That carries like the two batteries, which are like
Each
this
battery
big
weighs like
each.
2 pounds.
Yeah, so I've got that radio tattooed right here, actually. And so I had
Nice.
to lug this. I lugged this bitch everywhere just because the 152s that we had, those are great in theory and on paper, and in some AOs they work, just fine, right? But in my AO, those barely worked for like internal comms, right? So anytime I had to do my job started with a call to our company echelon, like started with a conversation with my FAC, right? So he was at our company pause, so I needed to be able to talk to him, right? And I couldn't talk to him on a 152, so that's why I had to lug this bitch around, because to be able to talk all the way to the company pause. Because and from there, any request, whether it's like artillery or air, everything had to get relayed. So I don't know what kind of like one of my well, he's not a boot anymore, but he was one of my boots back in the day. Like he was with Marsoc for a while. Super proud of him. The last time I got spun up on what radios and equipment dudes have now, it seems like things have come a long way. I'll say this, the lightest, smallest. I mean, ideally, it's nice to have the lightest, smallest, sexiest gear because again, speed and mobility equals survivability. But you can't do shit unless you get that radio working. So if you've got like, do they still have the 117 Golfs? I want to say like they're about as tall as these, but they're narrow.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
So I would say,
Even more
if you've
so.
got like what?
Even more so now because of the networking capabilities.
Okay. Like when it comes down to it, and if you're going into an unfamiliar AO, if you end up like hell, like if you end up fighting like on the Eastern Front, I mean, look at all that's going on in the world right now. So you got to think. I mean, we could go back to Afghanistan. There could be a war in the Pacific in Taiwan. You could wind up, in Ukraine or something like that. If you're in an unfamiliar area, opt for the radio that has the better reach, right? I'm just like, yeah, you see all this people, everyone, LARPing with this sexy comm gear, operator helmet, stuff like that. That's great if it works.
Yeah.
It works. From what I understand, it works great if it works. But if you're in an unfamiliar area, opt for the bigger, heavier radio that will work, right? And then after you kind of get settled and you got a feel for your area, then maybe use like your smaller, sexy radio. Believe me, I would have loved to have been able to do my whole job with a 152. I really would have, but no, I had to lug this bitch around because, well, that was life. So, and worst case scenario, if you get used to carrying this, one of these around, I think these are all dermo now. But if you get used to carrying the big heavy ass bitch, you'll be that much more effective if you can carry something smaller and lighter, right? So that's my rant about comms. Carry the heavier radio in an unfamiliar area that for sure will work, right? So that's my spiel on comms. So I would carry, aside from that, I had a personal Garmin GPS, and I guess I should go into that because the Dagger GPSs that they used to issue, they have a battery in them, like you're able to load crypto into those, so they're like encrypted, so you can't use that to be a blip on a map type thing.
Yeah.
I heard about that. I never actually met anyone who really cared about that, or for that matter, I never met a comm dude who knew how to actually load crypto into a dagger anyway. And it was something that was kind of in like on the back of my mind that like, okay, I don't know if for some reason they have support um, from some if the Taliban were to have support from some advisors, like I wonder if they could hack into our GPS, something like that. But no one really cared. I never heard of that being an issue.
No, I
And
think it
it was
was during that time. I don't want to cut you off, but during that time, the big thing was the guys were carrying these one, they had the personal GPSs like you're talking about, the little Garmin Fortrex, I think is what it was called. I think I had the Fortrex like 401 or something. But there
kind
was
of rectangular.
yeah, yeah. But
Sorry.
there was these Garmin walkie-talkies that were also a GPS, and when you radioed someone else, it sent your signal. And the fear was is that the Taliban dudes had some capabilities, and guys that were realizing like, hey, I'm having issues with my 152 getting signal or whatever, or my company doesn't have enough radio, so I'm gonna have my mom send me a couple walkie-talkies so we just have something internal to use. They were trying to keep guys from using that because they could spoof your GPS to tell you were in one place but you're actually somewhere else, or they could use it to like locate you, is what I was told.
Yeah.
I also never saw anybody that actually cared, but I also didn't really see too many people using off the shelf,
Yeah.
walkie talkies. We had the Motorola Black Gear, which is what we called it, the Black Gear, which was encrypted, not, I don't think in the same way that like a 152 is, but it gave a little bit more, I guess, security than just like a Motorola walkie talkie off the shelf. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That was a known issue. It was like in the Marine Times, there were briefs about it. But I don't know how in depth. I think it was more of like, let's get in front of this before it becomes an issue kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I heard a few rumors about that, but I mean, I still carried a Garmin GPS. I
Same.
would be much more weary of using something like that now, especially because you look who, I mean, our main like adversaries on the international stage right now. It's the CCP and Russia. So I would venture to say, I mean, I don't know, like get with your S2. That's your intelligence part. Ask them for a brief on like what kind of capabilities they have. I mean, you may I don't think dudes use daggers anymore, but I mean, get briefed up, like understand, like because I say all this to say, I was said before, when I taught this shit is like, yeah, invest in yourself, invest in your own gear, invest in a GPS. And I still think that's a general good idea, but you should probably check with your S2 to find out what the capabilities of the CCP are and Russia are, because those are. I'm not getting into how. I don't care how you do or don't feel about Ukraine or the CCP. Those are like, if you're active duty, that's most likely who you're going to end up dealing with. All right. So, I mean, complaining about the world is an old man's luxury. You're active duty, so you have to do what you're told, right? So understand your adversary. So, but aside from that, like if I mean, just get briefed up. But in general, I would say it's good to invest in a personal GPS. So I always had that. I would have I had an admin pouch that I would have. I carried something like a J Fire, or are those still handing out these days? J Fires?
On my way out, they were, yeah.
Yeah, something like a J Fire or some kind of like little laminated like template battle book or something like that, just in case. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of handy to have. I had one that a friend gave me. It was like a fifth Anglico battle book or something like that. It had some cool little stuff like how to program like an Iridium phone, some load crypto templates. It was pretty neat. It'd probably be a good idea to invest in your own little kind of like laminated templates and stuff, like max distances, maybe some intel on like foreign fire support agencies, just some kind of knowledge in there. Protractors, mat pens, multiple ones. I always had an IR buzzsaw or two kind of tucked in there. An IR buzzsaw is like just in case you have to mark an LZ. So I would have that. I would have an air panel just in case. It's just like an air panel is just like a folded up orange cloth thing. It's if you have to, it could be helpful to mark for an LZ for a Casevac. So IR buzz saws is good for that. I carry that. I would always carry a few smoke grenades again for also like for marking an LZ for a Casevac. That's part of your job. So I mean anything kind of terminal related. So I would handle Casevacs, in addition to other stuff. I recommend carrying a Boy Scout compass, and I see lots of dudes where sporting those little watch compasses. There may be some good ones out there. This is my advice. Don't rely on them. Don't just don't. I mean, if you have one and you like to use it, there's so many variables that can happen with compasses. I mean, this is a Seiko automatic. I don't even know if like the internals of this would throw off a little watch compass or not. I don't think so, but I wouldn't trust those. As a matter of fact, one time I was it was that one target that was 60 meters away. It was like the same target. We dropped a 500-pound bomb airburst and like 6 gun runs. And so I was giving like corrections, like from leads hits, it's like from leads hits, like northwest 20 meters, something like that. Well, you got to have a good reference for what directions you're talking about. And I remember calling that over the hook, and it was loud as shit. And I remember great dude. One of our squad leaders who was a sergeant time, he's a captain now. Great dude. I'm not shit talking him, but he was like, "Hey, Kerley." That I said like I was calling in the hook like from leads hits 20 meters northwest, something to that effect, right? And guy called out to me. He's like, "Hey, Kerley, that's actually northwest." And like I'm like, "What?" And he's like, he was pointing at his wristwatch compass. I'm just like, fuck off with your wrist compass, dude. It's just like I'm not going off of that thing. It's like no. So just don't throw that's gimmicky bullshit. Like, not I'm sorry if you bought like the $300 wrist compass from Sang Watches or whatever, but like those are stupid. Don't rely on those. So, but I mean, it's just
time and place. When you're dropping bombs, that's probably not the time nor the place to be using that. What I would do is on my watch, I used to have the I think it was a Seiko also, and you have the spin dial on it. I would if I was facing a target area, I would get my direction and then turn my dial of my watch so that it was correct. Yeah, and then I knew from me to my target was whatever the direction was, and I can make quick adjustments just by looking at my watch. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not going to want to hold your compass and do all this other stuff. It was just easier for me to do that. I don't know. That was like a quick way for me to do it, but I know what you're talking about.
That's really good. That's a really good technique. Hell, I guess while we're talking about watches, I mean, knowing what time it is pretty essential to your job. So invest in a good watch. Don't get some $20. I mean, this is a Seiko automatic. You can't go wrong with these. These do tend to run a little bit fast because that's like automatic watches, but get a good durable watch, like maybe a solar watch or something like that. And I mean, you can't go wrong with that. I mean, it's part of your kit, your outfit. So that. See, I went into buzzsaws. Capability to mark for Casevacs. I do still recommend carrying, some kind of like a Boy Scout compass, a decent one. My whole reason for that, I mean, you always have a lens edit compass on you. A lens edit compass is a small piece of green serialized gear. The thought of losing it terrified me. So I would still use it to get like, a good azimuth whenever I had to, but to mitigate pulling that out as much as I could. I had my own Boy Scout compass because, I mean, it doesn't matter if I lost that.
Yeah.
And so I recommend having one in your admin pouch. Gear-wise. Another thing is, I don't know what all is issued these days, and something you should do is you should take all your issued gear, like everything that you would like patrol with, your patrol pack, everything, and take a lens edit compass and test your gear, like test the mount on your Kevlar or like whatever cool little operator helmets you're getting these days. Like take a compass, hold it up to all your gear to see if anything is magnetic. Here's why. Back in the day, they used to issue these shitty training plates that had a certain amount of magnetic material in them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I saw this happening. People would hold them too close to their chest, and that needle would spin around and point at their gear. So check out if you got like some like nifty knife or whatever on your kit or whatever. That because one of the worst things that can happen to you is like you're all like operator, JTAC, Ricky Recon cool guy, right? And you're shooting azimuths, but come to find out you never took the time to check and see if any of your kit or the stupid shit you got at the PX is magnetic or not, and it could be throwing off your direction. So, and I was always real spooky about shooting azimuths, dude. I would always like take off my Kevlar, and I'd shoot an azimuth like a few times. Like one time, I actually had to, true story, and no one really realized what I was doing when I did it. This was a random thing that happened. So like in between pushes, like random shit would just happen. And one time we were on a convoy, we had to go to our company pause, and we were on our way back. One truck, the truck in front of me hit an IED down the vehicle. The turret gunner got kind of fucked up. He had one of those harnesses on, and when the IED hit, it kind of rattled him back and forth, and it like fucked up his pelvis. And so we had to Casevac him. And so the IED hit, and we started taking pop shots from the other side of the wadi. And I dismounted from my truck, and I went up because I heard Doc was treating somebody. So then I'm thinking, as the observer guy, that like, okay, there's going to be we got a casualty. Looks like it's going to be a Casevac, right? So I'm like, okay, it's time for me to go to work. I dismounted, booked it up to their truck. And so this is happening. They're dealing with Sutter was his name. And, we're taking pop shots. And I'm thinking, okay, all right, it's obviously going to be an urgent Casevac. And I start looking around for a spot to land a helo. So I found a flat spot, grabbed one of the guys that had our minesweeper, and I was like, hey, man, it's one of those things again where you have to kind of be calm and collected. And I was like, hey, man, can you grab your minesweeper? I'm just like, I want to land a bird right there. Can you clear like a 30 by 30 meter like area? And so I had him do that. And I remember, I don't know what happened. We were talking about GPSs and jammers, getting jammed and shit just a minute ago. But I looked at my little GPS, and this was the only time it happened. It worked fine after this. I don't know what happened to it, but I looked at it, and it was all pixelated. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if I was being jammed or whatever. It just wasn't working. I didn't know if the heat was getting to it. So I was like, well, shit. So this is what I did, right? Because the truck that had a working BFT in it was the truck that got hit, and the power was killed to the vehicle. So I couldn't pull a grid off of that, and my GPS wasn't working, and I don't think anyone was. Everyone was doing different shit, and so I didn't even ask. I don't think anyone else had a GPS on them. So what I did was I saw there was a hill. I want to say 5 clicks away or so in the distance, and I knew where that hill was on the map, right? And we're in a wadi, which is a linear feature. So I did that. So I'm on a linear feature, and I have a known point that I can see in the distance. So I stepped away. This is something you have to think about too. Like, what is a vehicle? It's a big hunk of metal, right? So does it make sense to shoot I'm not going to shoot a direction from a vehicle. I don't know what all is in that vehicle that could throw a direction off. So you can't shoot an azimuth from a vehicle. So I stepped away probably like 10, 20 meters, from that vehicle, stopped, shot an azimuth. This is while we're taking kind of random pop shots. I shoot an azimuth to this known point that I could see that was like 5 kilometers in the distance, and like I'm down, I have a map out, and I actually plotted, a reverse azimuth from that known point, and I terrain associated, and the wadi was about like 500 meters wide or so. And so then it was just a matter of terrain associating across where the wadi and the azimuth intersected, and just kind of doing a map spot like that, So, and I was able to shit a grid just using a straight up map and compass.
That's classic. That's classic FO stuff, man. That resection, doing that. You got your single point and 2-point resection. I mentioned it on the show multiple times. And, it's good for like young guys to know, but I don't know what it is now. I'm sure it's the same, but I remember in MOS school and stuff like that, the whole thing was you had to be able to do a call for fire, target locate, and do a call for fire in 2 minutes or less, and it had to be within like 200 meters or less. Like your location had to be within 200 meters or less, and that was the standard. And that's why FOs are always really good and a first choice for being JTACs, because their whole job is learning how to do targeting, how to do map work, how to do resections. I mean, ask a lot of people in the military to do a 1 or 2 point resection and find themselves on a map, and you're going to see a lot of people don't even know some of the very basics of land nav.
Yeah.
That's cool that you did that. That's cool that you did that in country. That's pretty wild. I don't know anybody else that's done a resection in country.
It's like, it was one of those things that like everyone was busy dealing with Sutter, and I was just focusing on like, okay, I gotta gen up this. I mean, a CASEVAC equals an LZ brief, so you need to generate the data for there's for the CASEVAC report and the LZ brief, and so for both pieces of that information, you need a grid. So no one really realized what I did. I just did it because it had to be done. It was just like, it's like, okay, I got to do this, this, and this. But looking back on it now, I'm more proud of that than anything else. And no one really kind of realized what I did. I didn't really suck my own dick about it or anything like that. It's just it just had to be done. But looking back on it, I feel really good about that.
That's legit, man.
Being able to like self-locate under pressure. Like I'm more proud of that than most other stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean you should be. You should be, because. Again, most people aren't put in a situation where they have to do something like that. So being put in that situation and then remembering your training and doing it properly. The thing is about resections, and for those that don't know, you're not going to get a grid accurate enough to drop a GPS guided bomb on it. But if you're doing a medevac, you're getting a 6-digit grid, which is good enough you should be within 100 meters, which puts the aircraft in your general area. And then he can see that, he can see that VS panel, that orange panel, so that he knows where to land. So, I mean, that's 100% the right tool. The right thing to do. I had a scout when I was in, with 3.6 in 2011, Lemelle. I talked about him multiple times on some of the earlier episodes of the show. He got into contact, and I remember he shot me a direction and distance, or they radioed back a direction and distance to the enemy. And I'll be honest, every time I was in the command center, and what I would do is like, I would get your location, like, okay, they gave me a pause rep, here's the direction and distance contact, and I would just plot it out on the map and go, here's the enemy grid, let's start looking for them with ISR, with the Pred or with the blimp or something like that. And it was never right. It was always off, and it was always coming from like the squad leaders, the infantry guys, and stuff like that. And then one time we got one, they were in contact, we got a direction and distance, we got a location, a direction and distance, and I plotted it. I gave the S2 guy the grid, sent to Reaper over there, and it was like immediately we see the guys, let's start, taking them out. And I was like, dude, that had to have been Lemelle out there. There's no way. Like, we've been getting bad direction and distances the whole deployment. Like, that was spot on. Even the S2 guy was like, dude, that was like exactly correct. And I saw him like a week later, I was at FOB Marja, and he was out at Sistani, out by the Sistani Gap. And he came by Marja and was like, I was like, hey man, was that you out there? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, did you have I even said to one of the guys that day, I was like, he probably had his laser rangefinder, his Vector Dagger. And he's like, no, I totally forgot it. I didn't bring it out, or whatever happened. I didn't bring it. And he's like, we were taking contact and we were down behind a berm. And he goes, I just popped up and used my compass and shot a distance or direction, and then just, estimated the distance based off the training that we always did, and sent that back. And I was like, dude, that shit was perfect. And the bad thing is that I shouldn't be like excited that he sent me a perfect thing. That should be the way it is every time. But unless you're trained to do that and you do it consistently, which is what a lot of forward observers do, as long as their chief is training them properly, then you can do those things. And, you should have the confidence to be able to be like, hey, I'm going to send this direction and distance in, and it's correct, so, man.
It is an important thing that like I really hype on, just map and compass, terrain association. I mean, those are just, basic infantry type skills that, I mean, a lot of dudes, it's just, you would think that terrain association would be a common skill. It's not really. I mean, I remember sometimes being out on patrol, and so would say, hey, yeah, we're looking at this compound. As like, what compound is it? Like, oh, it's Juliet 1-4, like the GRG. And I'm just like, dude, we can only see compounds that are like a kilometer away. You just called in a compound that's 5 clicks away. We can't even see that. Just like it's not that compound, it's this compound. It's like I'm
Yeah.
just like, so that would be kind of common. So just assume, if you're the JFO, JTAC, FO guy, just assume that everyone else sucks just assume that everyone else is going to suck at terrain association and map stuff. So if just in case that's the case, that is the case, you need to be the proficient one at it. So just assume.
Yeah, yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
anytime you're a forward observer, or fire support man, JTAC, whatever, you should be walking into whatever unit you're coming to and being the map plotting expert, the land nav expert. You've done it more than anybody else has, or you should have. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not comfortable with doing that, then that should be something you bring up to your chain of command. Like, we should do some, like, terrain association training and stuff like that, because as well as I do, if you look at a 1 to 50 map so much, you can see all those elevation lines. You can actually look out and go, oh, that's that mountain right here. Oh, that's that. I mean, those elevation, you start to see the actual terrain on the map. It just makes it easier. Just,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, man, but it's cool
Yeah.
stuff, dude. This is, we're at like 2 hours right now. I feel like we still got a lot to go. We'll have to schedule another interview or something, because this has been super
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah.
Where can,
We're kind of
before,
cliffhanger a little bit.
yeah, we'll leave it at a little cliffhanger. Before we jump off here, where can people find you? What do you got going on? Like, what's your purpose nowadays?
So I suppose what I'm known for most these days is I've got my own tribe going on at Raise the Black. That's at _ Raise the Black _ and it's taken on a life of its own. It's become a network of It's a whole hell of a lot more international than I ever thought it would be. It's become a network of dudes from a lot of UK veterans, dudes South Africa, New Zealand, Israel, all over the place. It's a network of veterans. I mean, after 20 years of GWAT, it's just it's become its own tribe, and so that's where a lot of my kind of energy goes these days, and is keeping that together. And so there's a business side of it, but I mean more importantly, I've developed a lot of friendships with more dudes than I ever thought through Raise the Black, and so it's a support. It's become a veteran support network, and it means a lot to me. I'm also a host on. I wanted to bring this up as well. I'm a host on another podcast called Subliminal Saints, and so if we could do some, I didn't mention this to you before, but if we could do some podcast overlap, I'd love to have you on over there.
Yeah, man, for sure.
So yeah. So I mean, we can push this over there, and it's been. Yeah, I mean, my purpose really, to kind of sum that up, has been, veteran networking kind of a thing. It becomes, the older I get, the more clear it becomes that we're all we have. I mean, these hotlines and stuff. I mean, those are great, but I've never really met anyone. Not knocking anyone that those types of resources have been a benefit to, but just in my experience, it's really been the case that we're all we have. So,
yeah, I don't think you're wrong, man. I think people have come to. You're right. The hotlines and stuff are like an emergency use kind of deal, but the reality is the support network that should be fostered and utilized is those guys that you served with, those guys you deployed with, those guys that have the same kind of stories as you, guys and girls. I say guys, whatever, like unisexually, but those people that are out there that understand your experience, because who else can do that? You know what I'm saying? You're talking about this Lone Tree Hill, like as much as you can explain it and tell us about getting blown up and being part of a daisy chain IED and the results of that, you and the guys that were standing on that hill are the only people that really understand what that was like. And the most important connection should be with someone like that first. And then these other resources. I'm all about people just reaching out. Like, guys get out of the military and then they just don't talk to anybody anymore. Or there might be like a text message that goes back and forth for a while. And then after a couple months, you start to see it trail off. And then it's like, man, I haven't talked to Johnny in 2 years. I wonder what he's been up to. And if you're asking yourself that question, I wonder what so-and-so's been up to, fucking reach out to him, man. Shoot him a text. Shoot him a call. They may answer, they may not. But, that's how we keep guys from fucking putting a gun in their mouth or something like that, is showing them that what they did matters, their life matters, and that there's people that care about them, and we're those people. We should be those people. I just heard about a guy that I served with at 210 that's I guess he's been in and out of prison, and I'm like, fuck, man, like that's not what I thought was going to happen when he got out. And it's, it's horrible to say that or hear that. And it's like, I wonder, you're like, I wonder if I would have called him or talked to him or whatever, or something. Could something have changed where that's not the path that his life took, because that's not the path that any of our lives should go down. But yeah, man, I think your page is great. I loved it. I love the content. I've enjoyed it before like I said, before I even knew you were an 0861. That happened like I think a year after I started following your page. Paul Smith was like, oh yeah, it was one of my scouts. I was like, oh, what? Like, no way. I didn't even realize. I actually thought, then I think I told you the first time I talked to you, it was like, I thought the page was run by some British military guy. That was the vibes that I got from it. So I think it's great, man. I'll make sure to put your Instagram handle on the screen for everybody to check out. And you got anything else before we cut this off?
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I hadn't brought up Subliminal Saints before, but I'll send you their page if you wouldn't mind putting them up as well.
Yeah, man. Send me the link if you have a link. I'll put it in the show description, and if you're listening, go there and check that out.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on over there. I guess to kind of wrap this up for now before like we were able to get you on over there, or another part two of this is, remember, we're all we have. I generally kind of go through this whole veterans path of mine, just assuming that it was just the other day, as a matter of fact, I got some dark DMs from a guy who's been following me for a while, and these were like pretty dark messages. And the first thing I did was like I called him, and he was like, "Oh, I can't believe you're actually calling me." I'm just like, well, I'm just going to assume that I'm going to assume that I'm all you have at the moment. So if you're having trouble, I mean, if you've gotten to the point where you've decided that you're going to end your path, I can't stop you. But if you're going to make that decision, you're going to make that decision. But I mean, if you're willing to reach out, I will take the time to talk to you. I'm a firm believer at, wherever I'm at in life, I'm a firm believer in talking to everyone at eye level. The last thing I have is any kind of, not insinuating that I am, an elite, but I mean, one thing I will never have is an elitist attitude, and so we're all we have. Remember that. You might be, all someone else has. So just
keep that in mind. Yeah, man. Yeah, no, again, just to reiterate, I think it's great. I think you're right. Guys got to be more involved in the each other once they separate from service. That's just a way to keep people on the on the even, try to. And for the people listening that may be struggling, realize you're not the only one, man. It may feel like a super lonely existence that nobody can understand, but you're not the only one. There's a lot of people struggling. I struggle. You struggle probably. I mean, everybody does. It's just, that's the unfortunate part of life, is struggle. But it's really what you do with it and how you get through that struggle, come out the other side, and now you're more experienced, and next time you see somebody going through that same struggle, now you can help them out because you know what it was like. You know what it felt like to be feeling lonely or feeling, remorseful for decisions or whatever, So, man, it's again, I don't want to keep beating the point, but reach out to people. And I guess that's really it, man. I guess people can find me at Former Action Guys, Former Action News, both of those on Instagram. My website's jkramergraphics.com, anglocoshop.com for my Angloco homies. And if you need anything custom, reach out, and I'm here to help out. Thanks again, man. It's been a really good conversation.
Yeah. Feels like we've been talking for 15 minutes barely.